give you more knuckle.
Hello guys and welcome to another episode of If Life Were an Anime. Today we're gonna focus on two characters, one traditionally conceived as a villain, although many thought of him as a hero or as a righteous and just person, which is Light Yagami from Death Note. And in the second part we're gonna talk about Bruce Wayne, Batman, and the whole vigilante complex and why society always is used to worship brutal millionaires and people who uphold unfair systems. So first let's get started with Light Yagami, and what I think Light Yagami is always misconceived as a very smart person. Don't get me wrong, he's very traditionally smart. For all of you who don't know, I don't know why, if you don't know who Light Yagami is, why even you're watching this video, but let me just do a quick recap. So Light Yagami is the main antagonist of the anime and manga Death Note. He's a high school student. He's very gifted at studying. Basically, he gets high scores, the highest in the nation in the entrance exam for Tokyo University, which is one of the hardest universities to get into. So he is very well recognized for his efforts in school and similar endeavors. So he's the type of straight A's student who is always admired by everybody. He's good looking and he has his whole career path already set up to follow the footsteps of his father in the Japanese police. But one day he finds a magical notebook that allows him to write the name of a person and kill them. So this is how Death Note starts, and most of you guys already know it. If you don't, this is a must-watch anime. But this is not an analysis on Death Note as a whole, but we'll focus just on Light and what I think is, or why I think Light Yagami is misunderstood as someone smart, or that he was doing some good work. And let's be real, let's talk about it. So Light Yagami in the first couple of episodes already up. He already makes a lot of mistakes and he almost gets caught at the very beginning of the series, and it's very easy to deduce why he's doing the killings and what kind of person he is. And here's what most people miss about the anime. In the very first episodes, Light, to test out the Death Note, kills some sort of kidnapper, like a random kidnapper. He gives him a heart attack, and that's what he chooses to be his MO. His way of killing people from now on will be to give them a heart attack, just to send a message. So if any criminal dies of a heart attack, Light or Kira has been involved. So very early in the series, L notices this. He begins to narrow down what are the possible places this killer could be, what his age could be, etc. So the first way he does this is by the schedules of the murders. So when Kira starts killing people, he does it at a certain hours, and these coincide with usually the schedule of somebody who goes to school or is working, and usually at times coincide with someone who follows more regular the schedule of a student, like goes to sleep at a certain hour and stuff like that. So L begins to think it could be a worker, like a salary person or a student. But why does L thinks he is a student instead of just like a salaryman? Because it could be possible. And this is the reason. Let me tell you why L is inclined to think that Kira is a young person.
Based on the fact that Kira's only killing criminals, I think it's safe to assume that he's driven by a very idealistic notion of justice. It's highly possible he may even aspire to be some sort of godlike figure. We're dealing with an individual who has a very childish concept of right and wrong.
L deduces that Kira is a young person because he's killing convicted criminals, people thought of traditionally as bad. but and his sense of justice is one of very, very like black and white. So this kind of tells us that the sense of justice of Kira is of someone who is very immature, very young, who doesn't know how society works. Because if you work in the legal system, like if you're a lawyer, you know that a lot of the times, and most of the times, people who deserve to be in prison do not end up in prison. And the factors that determine that are a lot of the times economic, social, political. So as a lawyer, you know there are certain populations who are targeted to fill up the prisons, especially in the United States of America. But it happens the same all around the world. If you have ever been involved, if you're an adult or a teenager, and you have ever been involved in a real situation with the legal system, like having to go to court for any reason, you soon will realize it's a scam. A lot of things that would play into your sentence would be the way you look, your race, your history, what kind of lawyer you were able to afford. I mean, lawyers all the time, depending on how much money you have, will put more resources into your defense. Like if you have enough money to pay experts, they'll bring up experts from all over the country to testify in your favor. Now the experts are not paid to lie, they are paid to give their expert opinion, but these experts charge very good amount of money to give their opinion. So most of the time they wouldn't go against the opinions of the people who are paying them. So you see, they're not directly paid to lie, but there's kind of a business deal, unspoken agreement that they will kind of say something positive in your favor. Like I remember this Harvard lawyer in one episode of the JRE podcast where he got asked this question, you know, the experts that you bring, you're not paying them to say anything, you're just paying them to give their opinion. So what assures you that they will say something that will favor your client? And he used to say, you know, in my 10x years of experience, or whatever years it was, hiring experts and paying them, I never once told them to say anything, but they never once have ever said anything against my client.
People would ask me like, well, how do you choose an expert? And I'll be like, I just ask everybody else what kind of expert they use. And they're like, what if the expert says something you don't want them to say? I'm like, that does not happen. And they're like,
so that very clearly teaches you that the legal system is exactly that. It's a legal system, not a justice system. Sometimes the judge simply won't like you, or the judge won't like how you look, how you speak, or he simply will believe the other person. So there are many, many, many factors besides pure justice and good police work that will play a part in if you get sentenced. There are a lot of bad people in the world, man. Like you want to see bad people that never got sentenced, never did any time. Look at DuPont Air. Look at the horrible monster that this guy is. Look it up in Google. DuPont Air, Family Air, and the crimes that he committed. It's horrible. It's things from a horror movie, and he didn't do one day in prison. Instead, he got treated as a mentally ill person, and his sentence is to go to therapy, although he did a crime so horrible I cannot even speak about it without vomiting. So another type of criminal that never goes to prison could be a politician, man. Politicians all the time are doing so much harm to society. Politicians are allied with drug dealers. Politicians launder money. Politicians have people killed. They have teachers killed. They have reporters killed. They have a lot of people unalived, so to speak. So in this world, there are CEOs of companies who are literally paying some thugs to go beat up natives to steal their land, or to have them to stop protesting and keep doing business in their countries. There are people who are making money out of enslaving children in cobalt mines, enslaving children, in sweatshops in Asia. There are people who are making money paying pennies to a lot of starving people, and then they take those products and sell them $1,000 a piece in the West. So there are a lot of evil people running society that never go to prison. And these are the type of people that Kira will never punish. Kira just punishes people who are already convicted in prison, which is kind of dumb. Let's say if their sentence is very light, you could say, well, the sentence is a little light for the crime that they committed and Kira can punish them, I guess. But most of the time, Kira doesn't even ponder that. He just say, okay, this crime to me is too violent. This guy deserves death. But he never stops and think at any point in the series, you know what? Bill Clinton ordered the bombing of Yugoslavia and killed hundreds of thousands of people and destroyed a country. Or he never stops and ponders any of the wars that are happening in his time and say, you know what? The people who initiate these wars, the companies, the CEOs, like Raytheon, who profits from war, like Dick Cheney, George Bush, you know, all these people that start wars for profit. He never enter into his justice radar, and he never goes out there and punishes them. If he had done that, he would be a hero. You know, he would be trying to clean up the world, because the problems of the world are not solely the responsibilities of a couple of, you know, pickpocketers or street thugs, but the real thugs, man, run society. The real thugs are elected, man. If you look at any country, but let's take an example of the country most known for like drug trafficking, like Colombia, Mexico. The politicians and the drug dealers are one. They are in an allegiance. The same with the military. The military in Mexico and in many countries disappears people. They disappear hundreds of students, hundreds of protesters. The military, the drug dealers, they are one cartel. And it's no different in the USA. The USA is filled with systemic violence, both from the military and the police, and even the health system. There are people who get written off, not only by being killed or sent to prison, but also sent to mental hospitals. And there are a whole lot of data on that. So, you know, the United States has the CIA. The CIA has committed many crimes outside of the USA borders and inside the US borders. So, you know why Kira didn't kill guys like Henry Kissinger, man? Like, Henry Kissinger is one of the architects of the Vietnam War, a horrible person all around. You know, there are tons of examples of people who Kira targeted and people who intentionally Kira didn't even think of. And that's why Elle can very confidently say that Kira is just some immature young serial killer with a very, very basic sense of justice. And that's why people who admire Kira admire being lazy, you know, easy solutions, being lazy, never attacking the real root of the problem. That's why you can unalive 1,000 thugs in the street, but the conditions of the street will never change. You know, the crack epidemic was caused by the United States government to fund the war in Nicaragua. For political reasons, they would bring drugs into the country and allow that drug money to be used to buy weapons to fight the civil war in Nicaragua. So it happens in a lot of wars. You know, Afghanistan is the #1 producer of heroin, and heroin production increased during U.S. occupation of Afghanistan. So the U.S. has never been a good guy. So why doesn't Kira target these kind of politicians, these leaders, all these corrupt people that make the world a worse place to live in? So that's it. That's my basic analysis of Kira, on why I think the people who admire him are just like lazy. Never want to really study a problem. They think the solutions of the problems that we face are obvious, and they aren't. Well, we must really study a problem deeply and see the root causes of what is the real issue, you know. And at the very root issue, if you study most of the problems that plague us in today's society, they are related to an economic system of exploitation, whether it exploits people in its own borders or outside, whether it creates imaginary enemies in the faces of immigrants. Most of the world's problems come because the capitalist system has a drive to expand, and the only way it has managed to expand in a limited world will always be through war. That major capitalist powers in the world fight each other for control of economic markets, and they overthrow governments. They have done so in Africa and Latin America and in Asia, and they will continue to do so as long as it is profitable. And so people might say, well, war is not profitable. Well, it's not profitable for the average citizen because the average citizen has to pay for the war by paying taxes. But if a company gets very profitable war contracts to rebuild or to, provide certain products for the military or equipment for the military or even mercenaries for the military, all of these contracts are billion-dollar contracts that get paid by the taxpayers, by the regular citizens. And the bill of the war is not paid by the corporations who profit off of this. When a country gets invaded and their oil resources are taken by private corporations, the real winner is a private corporation, but who had to pay for the war, for those soldiers to go and kill and die there, was the average citizen through taxes. And once the oil company profits from the war, they will never pay taxes on that. The taxes and the bills will all go to the average working person. That's why working people should never support any war, because it's the working people who are sent out to die in the war. It's never the sons of the rich, never, and it never has been. So wake up, war is a racket, and it always has been. And that's why easy solutions, killing thugs, it's dumb, man. Now let's jump to Bruce Wayne and what I think he's the epitome of what the idea of a superhero in the United States is. So let's analyze Bruce Wayne, man, his character, his history. So Bruce is a kid who watches his parents get murdered by some low-life thug. We're never really explained the reason, probably a robbery, and I know there are other explanations, but let's take the traditional unknown thug, unknown killer theory. So his parents get murdered, he gets trauma out of the situation like any kid would. But let's start with that. Like, Bruce Wayne becomes an adult, and although he's a billionaire and he's able to spend as much money as he can trying to overcome this trauma, he can never let it go. And I have an issue with that, because I've seen people whose parents got killed as well in the war. I've seen people who lost their parents in many different situations, and there are people who get over it the best way they can. They don't forget about it, but they get over it and manage to live happy, normal lives in spite of the tragedy. But for some reason, it's like Bruce Wayne can never let it go. He devotes his whole life to terrorize the low-life thugs of Gotham City. And the issue with Kira and Bruce Wayne is exactly the same. You got a guy who has all the resources in the world to actually make a change, to organize the people of Gotham, to hear their grievances and help them out. But what he chooses to do is to dress up and go beat the living out of the most common regular thugs that police could handle. And I question how effective that is to actually bring about actual change. No matter how many individuals Batman can beat up during the nights for many, many years in Gotham City, the conditions that produce those individuals will never change, and more individuals will be there to replace the old ones. So it's kind of a senseless endeavor, and it's a little bit dumb, honestly. He's a billionaire. He really could start a lot of programs that could really help the city and give people alternatives. Now let's take the other side of the coin, right? Batman 50% of the time beats low life thugs. The other 50% he beats mentally ill people with and terrorists, let's just say, like the Joker puts a bomb somewhere, so Batman has to go there and disarm the bomb and put the Joker in jail, and 5 months later the Joker is out again. So why doesn't he spend his money, improving the security, I guess, in Arkham Asylum, or changing a little bit the legal system? It's like, how many times does the Joker has to put a nuclear bomb in Gotham City or somewhere else for them to finally, put this guy in a real prison, or even, just execute him? Like, I'm not against the death penalty, but if there's someone who deserves the death penalty, is this guy. So Batman, all his nemesis are mentally ill people, and why shouldn't they be? It's like the whole city is crazy. Batman is mentally ill. He cannot get over the trauma of his parents' death. First of all, he chooses to deal with his trauma by dressing up and being brutal on other people who, as far as we know, might or might not deserve it. And at the end of the day, he does this not because it makes any changes. The whole idea of Gotham is it never changes. He does this for his individual satisfaction. So Batman is not a healthy individual. He's like a sadistic, brutal vigilante whose only way to deal with his parents' death is through violence. And he never really extends a hand in more than a fake gesture, or more than a superficial gesture towards anybody. And there's the whole deal of why he puts himself in this dangerous situation, almost looking for death, and never really gets into the politics of Gotham, of who's really controlling the city, who's really making the decisions, and what's so wrong about this system. You remember, like, the Batman movie with Bane? There was something about the movie that most people were identifying with Bane and the struggle of the regular people of Gotham, that they really had to make Bane put a bomb in a stadium just to make him the bad guy, because there were so many reasons that people in the theaters were sympathizing with Bane and his cause, and not with Batman. So Batman is like the ideal police officer. He's like a rich guy police officer who unlawfully, illegally beats people up and doesn't change anything, doesn't get to know them, doesn't question why they're there. So it's like, he's like, police on steroids. He is not held accountable for his actions. He works outside the law. He's not very smart the way he approaches the problems. He doesn't really help anybody. He's just there to be the muscle, just look to, like, intimidate, threaten, and brutalize people into submission. And he never gets any real change done. And then you have the whole aspect of Bruce Wayne, being an adult living with like a series of orphan boys whom he manages to get in dangerous situation all the time, and it's kind of sus, if you ask me. If you're a millionaire, a good-looking single millionaire with no girlfriend who prefers the company of young boys, actually, that's kind of sus to me. He's like Michael Jackson, man. I don't care if you think the guy was a good singer. There was definitely something sus when your lawyers, because his lawyers used to say, Mike, we know supposedly you don't have any bad intentions, but we as your lawyers would advise you to stop seeking the company of young boys that are not related to you in any way, shape, or form. and Mike used to say no in his like high tone voice, and he kept doing it. And for me, you ask me, man, and an innocent man who has been accused of these horrible actions would kind of stop doing them once, after he has been sued 3 or 4 times for the same reason. Now, even if you have good intentions, you would say, you know what, to avoid the problems, I'll stop inviting unknown children to my mansion to stay there with me, and pay their parents, expensive vacations to never ask what we're doing. The same thing goes on with Batman, man. He's like a very sus character, and that's why I don't like Batman. I don't like what he represents, and that's why I think Batman is like the ideal of what capitalist society think a superhero is. This one guy who can do everything and changes nothing, and spends all his spare time beating poor people up. One thing I'm reminded of when I'm talking about this is there's a series, I don't know what streaming service has it, but it's a series about this Nazi police officer. So it's a supposed Nazi that is no longer a Nazi, and he becomes a police officer, and his face is covered with Nazi tattoos. And I was thinking, man, this is the one way society can tell you the truth without telling you the truth. The ideal cop is a Nazi. It's a guy who looks like that and can be a police officer, and that's what the media and the right-wing fascist conservative media wants the police to be, and what police is, just this fascist Nazi police guy. So I was thinking it was so ironic that they're portraying this as a show with no intention, but underneath the psychology of it, the subconscious idea behind it is this is what the people really want. They want a Nazi cop, and that's usually why they get cops. Most of them are extremely racist and conservative, and they don't care what they get paid for. A cop will do the job. If a cop's job today is to evict a family of 5 children because a bank wants their house or their farm, they will go in there and bash the heads of the family and do it. So a cop has no honor and no sense of morality. They will do it. And if a cop's job tomorrow is to help a little lady cross the street, they will do it. But what I mean is the cop will do what he is ordered to do, what he is paid to do. He has no individuality, no sense of justice, and if he does have it, he has to suppress it. And that's why I think it's a very suspicious, or it's a type of job I wouldn't take, because it's the type of job that would require you to look the other way when injustices are happening, because injustices are systemic, and the systemic injustices, the injustices that come about the way society is structured because of its class society, like those are the types of injustices that never get tackled by people like Light, or by people like Bruce Wayne, or by any other superhero, because superheroes at the end of the day have and they must maintain the status quo. So that's my take on these two guys. You should watch Death Note if you haven't. And Batman, I don't have to say much about it. I watch Batman movies, even though I think he's an asshole, and but it's very obvious to me the background of all the thematics that lie beneath the stories, beneath the superficial stories. So that's why I don't like Batman. Anyway, guys, thank you for listening. Have a good day.